We all knew this one was coming. Skin of Evil, aka the episode where Tasha Yar dies. Oh yeah, the thing on the right. That's not Tasha Yar. Right, that's actually Riker's face. Anyways, though, and this is actually one of those things where I'm going to take a brief moment because the whole Tasha Yar dies thing is actually such a key plot point in this episode that talking about the possibility of killing off player characters feels mandatory because of all of the episodes of the Next Generation, this is the only one where they actually really seriously killed off a major character in the actual series. In one of the movies, they killed off Data, sort of, kind of, but not really. But not in the actual series. Now, they did kill off characters, several of them, not the main cast. They would introduce a side character, then, like, oh no, the side character died. We will miss you if we remember you. Yeah. So, Skin of Evil. What about Skin of Evil would be particularly compelling for the players? Well, the starting premise for this one is actually rather interesting. If you leave out the weird subplot with Tasha Yar flirting with Worf, because they threw that in here knowing that they were going to kill off Tasha Yar later in the episode. I think they did it to give Tasha Yar more screen time to give viewers more reason to care about the fact that they kill her off later. Which, okay, sure, that kind of sort of works because one of the things with the Next Generation is that there is a large enough cast that they don't use everyone equally in every episode. Certain characters are always there. Certain characters, not so much. Tasha Yar was one of those where she would not necessarily do things in every episode. And of course, Wesley. We definitely did not have Wesley in every episode, and that was a good thing. But one of the things about this one that's interesting is that it actually has several minor characters, like Ben Preto, who spends the entire episode unconscious because his role in the story is he was the guy who was acting as the shuttle pilot when Deanna Troi ends up crash landing on the alien planet of the week. He does not fare as well as she did, and he doesn't actually do anything because he's literally laying on the console unconscious, and that's it. This actually has quite a few minor characters in it, though. In addition to him, he doesn't even die. That's actually the interesting thing is that Tasha Yar goes out like a red shirt, but of course there's an out of universe reason for that. But and that actually gets into the whole concept of why kill off a player character. If a player has decided they don't feel like playing a character in the future, you could, just write this character out of the story by killing them and, try to make it fun because it's something that is memorable. Whether people like it or hate it, they remember it. And that was actually one of the things about this episode that made it stick in people's memory because when you actually carefully look at the serious main plot, it's kind of short and boring. Anyway, though, so yeah, the side characters in this one, there's actually a rather interesting assortment of them. One of the other things that's special about this one, though, is that the story is a multifaceted story, but it's all focused on this guy, Armus, because Armus is the reason Deanna Troi can't leave Vagra 2. And we don't actually know anything about what Armus says. We never find out anything. Okay, we do get a tiny handful of scraps of information, but I was tempted for a moment to do a deep dive trying to puzzle out Armis's true backstory and history, and I don't have enough information to do a deep dive into what he is. You end up with just empty speculation and nothing but empty speculation. So we do not know how long Armis has existed. Okay, the Vagra 2 natives created Armis, but in a process that Armis claims was the Vagra 2 natives purging themselves of their inner evil and thus turning themselves into beings of light who were now radiant and beautiful and whatever, and so on and so forth. Oh yeah, dazzles all who see them. Yeah, this is what Armis said about the Vagra 2 natives who had done this. Now, this is also one of those things that's interesting because the fact that it kind of hints that this was a race of super beings. Are they humanoids? Maybe not. What are they, though? We don't know. And one thing that's notable about this episode and Vagra 2, specifically Vagra 2, is that we have a pretty nice panorama of Vagra 2. You notice what we don't see in this panorama of Vagra 2? Any sign of civilization. Not a tiny trace. You see where you had the shuttlecraft crash land. Okay, cool. But that doesn't belong here. That's not from Vagra 2. Everything that belongs here is either dirt, a rock, or that puddle Armus lives in. There is nothing else visible on the surface of Vagra 2 at any point in the episode. And of course, this is one of those things that gives you a reason to question whether or not the planet was inhabited by humanoids. Although, given the fact that we don't actually know how long it's been that Armis has been there, it could have been a lush and verdant Class M world when the Vagrants left. And Armis, in his many, many years of boredom, has trashed it because he literally had nothing better to do. We don't know. Again, though, it's like we don't actually know enough about Armis's past to make even educated guesses about any of this stuff. Just that he's ancient and evil because he's allegedly born from the inner evil of the Vagrants. And oh yeah, that's all we know. Why exactly Armis is seemingly immortal and unkillable? Now that does give you reason to wonder what the Vagrants are. Because if this was their inner evil, what's the rest of them like? Again, though, like I said before, we don't know anything. And thus ends the speculation on Armis because I think that's literally every single thing that we know about Armis and the Vagrants. So many questions. There are no answers. Anyway, though, moving on. Using this in an episode. This is the classic kind of episode where fighting your way out of the situation is impossible. In fact, in the episode as aired, The only thing that they managed to figure out as being a weakness of Armus was triggering emotional outbursts from Armus. Anytime Armus wasn't calm and collected and had a fit of rage or whatever other intense emotion, it disrupted Armus's ability to jam communications and transporters, which would give them a short window where they could beam people out. And, and that is how they escaped in the end. Because while Armus is extremely powerful and no known method exists of killing Armus, I mean, we there's not actually a long list of things they tried, mostly just shooting him with hand phasers. That was it. Anyways, though, aside from that, Armus's range of his abilities actually does have a known range. That is something that is actually kind of interesting, although I don't remember um exactly what that was. Let's see if it actually says it here. The shuttle is on Vega 2, blah blah blah, caught in Vega's gravity and falls to the planet. Then the ship goes to Vega 2. Now, one of the things that's questionable in this episode is why did the shuttle crash land on Vega 2? Uh Interesting question. Oh yeah, this is another thing. Lynch. We don't actually see him in very many episodes either. One thing that's a recurring thing in season one of the Next Generation is that Geordi LaForge is a chief engineer. The position of chief engineer, if it gets used in an episode, falls to some other engineering officer who is a rando who shows up for that one episode and is often never seen again. This particular character showed up twice ever. Why? I don't know. Uh, the most obvious explanation is simply that um, the people didn't cast one for the main cast, and thus had to keep replacing the character whenever they had a reason why they wanted to write one. It's just why? I don't know. Anyway, though, that's getting sidetracked. Swenson, yet another character that gets mentioned in dialogue, and that's it. Oh yeah, here he is on the console, unconscious. He lives, but you know. Okay, so the fact that Armus's powers have a limited range is interesting. I vaguely recall having. Here we are. It's a graphic showing field density lines and the location of the crash shuttlecraft, with the obvious implication being that the area around the shuttlecraft is the only area that Armus is actually able to keep up a transport inhibitor field in order to block transport off the planet. And that graphic shows what is possibly the maximum extent of Armus's range there. Now, this is something that's interesting here is that if Armus did somehow cause the shuttlecraft to crash, then this isn't the full range of Armus's abilities in general, but that he can't create that kind of a field over a greater range. And whatever other abilities he might be able to use, are less widespread because We don't really know why the shuttlecraft crashed, honestly. It feels like a doesn't feel like a coincidence because it crashes on a planet with an extremely hostile alien that wants people to crash there in order to uh, play with them until they die, usually. Which, of course, is kind of interesting. And that's another thing about this, though, is that this is the first time that the Federation had actually had people beam down to this planet and encounter Armus. If anyone from the Federation had done a survey of this planet, they hadn't encountered Armus. Why? Um, Excellent question. It is, of course, possible that if someone was to beam down to the planet on the other side of the planet, they might be able to avoid Armus simply by not being close enough to Armus for Armus to bother them. Although, if the guess is right about Armus being able to cause things to crash, eh, hard to say, you know? Then again, it's notable that Armus did not at any point in the episode threaten to make the Enterprise crash. So it's possible that whatever he did to the shuttlecraft was a smaller scale action that does is not something that Armus is capable of doing to a full size starship. Again, we don't actually know what it was, so however, as a game master, I wouldn't actually use Armus. I would use some other malevolent alien entity, and thus, whatever that other malevolent alien entity's ideas and plans are, you can make up the extent of its abilities for yourself and not feel constrained by the canonical abilities of Armus. You could, however, have fun with Armus, because the fact that forcing someone's shuttlecraft to crash land on Vagra 2, knowing that Armus lives there and is probably going to kill whoever crash lands there, that is something I could definitely see someone doing in order to, like, oh, we want to kill you, but we want to have fun with it. Blowing you up the old-fashioned way is boring. And also, if you have someone crash land on a planet, you can, pretend it's an accident, even though this world has been quarantined possibly for decades by the point you have your adventure. Now, if you really wanted to have fun with Armus, you could actually try exploring Armus's past. Because the way that they got Armus to have emotional outbursts was talking to Armus about his past. That was the only thing that they could do to initiate any sort of reaction to Armus that caused him to momentarily lose control. And it only worked twice, which is why they literally ran for their lives and got out of the solar system completely. But would your party be able to do that? Probably. At any rate, though, like I said, other than the Tasha Yar dies episode, there really wasn't a massive amount of stuff here. I know the Arsenal of Freedom is like jam packed with all sorts of history, lore, and blah 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 blah. This was talking to Armus about his feelings, and not even getting a whole lot of concrete answers out of him. Well, at any rate, I think that's good enough here. Killing off players. Hey, sometimes it happens as a random fluke. Sometimes you can have a player character get killed off because they want to die. Because that's kind of sort of the reason Tasha Yar got killed off. At any rate, with that note, I'm done. See you guys later.